welcome back to my channel. My name is Carly Stevens and this is Carly Stevens Books for all things writing, publishing, and indie author life. All right, ready to get villainous. Who doesn't love a great villain? Whether it's the classic villains like Madame Defarge or Professor Moriarty, or movie villains like Darth Vader or Thanos, or more contemporary book villains. Everybody loves a good villain. So I wanted to talk about what I think makes an excellent villain. Before I do that, quick definition of terms, teacher. So not every book needs a villain. Every book does need an antagonist, and the difference is just that an antagonist is a person or force that opposes the protagonist, the main character, but an antagonist can be inhuman, it can be like bad weather, it can be an antagonist. A person can be their own antagonist. The main character can be a bad person, and the antagonist can be a much better person who's going against them, who's the force opposing them. So I just want to make sure that we're not confusing terms here. But a villain is an antagonist that is a person that is opposing the hero, the main character. Okay. So what does it take to make an amazing, memorable, compelling, terrifying villain? That's what I want to talk about today. I talked about this in my creative writing class earlier, so I'm going to be referencing this sheet that I handed out. So a few things you need to keep in mind as you're writing villains. First, just what is their goal and how does that goal directly oppose the protagonist? If their goal doesn't directly oppose the protagonist in any way, then they're not going to be a villain in the traditional sense at all. So give some thought to the villain as a person, starting with the most basic information. What's the name? What do they look like? What's their goal? And how is that against the protagonist? Either so it's directly against the protagonist in that it affects the protagonist directly, but sometimes the villain's goal is not, I am going to thwart you in particular. Sometimes it's, I'm going to take over the land that you are trying to protect, and therefore my actions are directly affecting you, even though my goal is not to take you down in particular. Does that make sense? I hope so. Okay, in order to make people believe in your villain and make them more than just a mustache twirler from the Hanna-Barbera cartoons. No offense, Hanna-Barbera, I really like your cartoons, but they're cartoony, right? You don't want a cartoony villain. Those are not the most compelling, certainly not in books, is to treat them as people. Now, there's definitely been a trend toward this for the last 10 years or so, taking villain origin stories to the nth degree. But what I mean by treating them as people is not that exactly, but do give them a history. How did they grow up? Where did they grow up? What was a formative experience for your villain? Treat them as you would the main character, or really any other character in the story. Give them a full life. This formative experience, this background, doesn't need to be this traumatic thing that turned them into a villain necessarily. Explore formative experiences that are not that. What is it that gave them the particular interests that they have, or the relationship that they have with different family members or people that they know? So that's one way to treat them as people. Number two is give them layers. A really easy way to do this is, okay, you have an idea for a villain, right? They do terrible things, they have these goals, they're willing to do anything to meet that goal, even bad stuff. So to give them layers, consider just a couple elements to their personality, a couple of traits, a couple of things that are good about them, that go against that stereotypical villain trope. What are positive things about them? Are there things that they care about, that they're good at, that you wouldn't expect from a character in that position? So yeah, give it some thought. What are two good things about this character? Now, one of the most important ways that you can develop a villain in a meaningful way and treat them as a person at the same time is understanding how they think that what they're doing is right, or how are they the hero in their own mind. You might have heard this before, and it's just really excellent advice. How are they the hero of their own story? According to them, the hero is probably the antagonist, the villain, and they are the hero. So do you understand that inner working of the villain? Because it's going to make them more than just like, aha, I just like destruction. You can have a character that just likes destruction, but are they maybe the victim of these other people who treated them poorly, so they have the right to destroy? What is it that motivates your villain and makes them think that they are right in what they're doing? My class came up with it ended up being a really compelling character whose goal was to take over the homeland of the hero. However, from the villain's perspective, this homeland was run by really evil people. Some of the backstory that they came up with for this character was that they had been, harmed as they grew up by just injustices and things that were poorly run, and so it makes sense that the villain would want to take over this area to depose the current people in power and to control this area that had done them so much wrong in the past. Number 4, another way to treat them as real characters, real people, is to make them proactive instead of reactive. We've all seen those movies where the hero is in a big fight scene, let's say, and the big boss's minions are all coming at the character, and they kind of take turns. They wait politely and attack one at a time so that they don't overwhelm the hero and his delightful plot armor. So yeah, we don't want to do that. We don't want the villain to be passive or just kind of wait for the hero to arrive, that kind of thing. Instead, how are they going to take active steps toward their goal that will affect the story before, the big showdown at the end? Okay. So then we have villain versus hero. There are some dynamics here that should be explored. Now, with all writing advice, take this advice with a grain of salt. Take what works for you, get rid of what doesn't. But this advice that I'm giving is going to help you create a really compelling villain if you don't have other ideas, specific reasons why you should go against this advice. Anyway, all advice is kind of conditional when it comes to writing, but here are some things that definitely have worked for me and that I've seen work in a lot of places. All right, hero versus villain. So what is a way that the villain mirrors the hero? This is not something that 100% has to be the case, but very often when you're pitting two people against one another, what you get are foil characters. So those are characters that are intentionally meant to be contrasted in order to highlight certain characteristics. This means that they'll have a number of similarities that cause you to compare them, and then a couple of noted ways that they branch off from each other in the way that they react, in the way that their personalities are, that kind of thing. So in what ways do they mirror each other? If you just think about Marvel movies at the end, besides having a sky beam, 80% of the time, I love Marvel, but there are a lot of sky beams. You often have the main villain going against the hero using the same technology, or the same information, or something that really makes us look at them side by side, and it's almost like they're literal mirror images of each other in this final battle. So what that does is it can show sort of a compatibility within the story of why this hero, why this villain. We see that they're matched up, but more importantly, it shows us things about the villain and about the hero, and we can evaluate those differences in a meaningful way. Okay, hero versus villain. Something that was something that I needed to work on when I first started getting serious about writing and editing, and I decided I'm going to be a published writer, is making sure that the villain was difficult to defeat, that we show how the villain is actually stronger or more prepared than the hero is. It can be tempting to make things a little bit easier for the hero because that makes things easier for us as writers, but in what ways is the villain not easy to defeat at all? Are they smarter than your hero? Are they better equipped? Maybe they have an army or something like that. Do they have better information? Are they just literally stronger? What is it that gives them this edge above the hero? At least at the beginning, the villain has to be stronger. Otherwise, there's really not a ton of conflict going on if your central conflict is meant to be hero versus villain. And then the final kind of question you can ask yourself in this category is, how do you know before the end? We assume there's probably going to be a big showdown at the end. But how do you know before the end that the villain can actually harm the hero? Like, what do they do to harm the hero before we get to that end? So this I kind of struggled with. Like I said, I would have like a war far away, but there were no repercussions that would directly affect my my main characters, as it were. So I needed to start adjusting that and adding more direct consequences to my heroes instead of just hearing about something far away and being like, oh, we really have to solve that problem. So in what way will the villain harm your hero? Are they going to physically attack them? Are they going to weaken them in some way? Are they going to go after some, loved one? Or, what is it? It's going to look different if you're writing fantasy versus like a cyberpunk thriller or what have you. But give that some thought. How do we know? That will ramp up the tension and the stakes and just the fear that we have for our hero's well-being, which you need in a story like this. Okay, concerning redemption arcs is my next big category. To be sympathetic or not to be sympathetic, that is the question. So an overall question to kind of begin thinking about as you're considering whether or not to give your your villain a redemption arc is, did anything in the villain's backstory compel them to act like this? It's important to know where they're coming from. Why are they thinking that this is okay? Why are they taking such drastic measures to achieve what they want? And understanding a villain better is not the same as condoning their actions. There's been a bit of a trend toward saying, well, they had, a really horrific childhood, and yes, they killed some people, but that's not an excuse. A lot of us had really terrible things happen, and yet we are not villains. We are not, committing all of these atrocities or what have you. So this is still a choice that characters are making. However, understanding where that choice is coming from is the basis of understanding where to move from there. So just giving a sad backstory is not the same as giving a redemption arc. Everybody has an origin story of some kind. You know, I have an origin story of how I wanted to be a writer, you know, and that just gives you a little bit more understanding of who I am, but it doesn't mean that I'm going to move in one direction or another, do anything particular with that. So if you want to give your character a redemption arc, if you want to redeem your villain by the end, think about the way that you treat character arcs for your hero. Your hero is more than likely going to have a positive character arc. They're going to start with some kind of weakness or misperception or flaw that is overcome by the end. So you just take the villain and ramp that up to 11. So now, instead of them having, you know, a lack of self-confidence that must be overcome by the end through, you know, training and different experiences, now you have a character who has just, you know, evil ways of thinking that need to switch. So, like I said, think about how you would treat your hero in their positive arc. It's these steps that really push against their that thing that needs to change, right? It's either that the thing that needs to change is going to be reinforced. You know, it's true, you're not enough, and here's some proof that your lie that you're believing about yourself is correct. Or somebody else comes in and the hero is able to step up and it's like, no, I am enough, and then by the end they can see that lie has been replaced by the truth of, yes, they are enough, etc. So with a villain, you give them the same types of steps. If they need to see, oh wait, no, the leaders of this homeland are actual people, and not every single one of them is corrupt and deserves, you know, the wrath that I'm about to visit on this land. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I need to, you know, stop that very drastic thing that I ordered a second ago so I can reevaluate my priorities. What you want to avoid is having too quick of a 180. Nobody's going to believe it. It's not going to ring true to how it is for humans. I mean, we're capable of change, right? But we're not capable of instantaneous change most of the time. Even if people point out the error of our ways or we see a good example or whatever, it can definitely change the trajectory of our lives toward that change. But we're not going to change overnight. We're used to thinking a certain way. We're used to acting a certain way. And so it's going to be this gradual set of steps toward something instead of this complete flip. I did a video about this topic a little less in depth or something similar on my other channel, which still has a lot of backlist fiction writing videos. It's called English Nerd, if you haven't checked it out. Lots of good stuff over there. But I think I used the example of the Winter Warlock in Santa Claus is Coming to Town, that really strange claymation movie. So he's this evil villain. You see a blizzard behind him. He's like, you know, he's laughing maniacally and all of that. And once he gets a Christmas present, literally the ice melts off of him and he becomes very nice and soft-spoken and helpful. And like, it's just absurd. I mean, the whole movie is absurd, so I guess it works for that, but that you want to avoid that. So some ways to avoid it. What is one way that you're going to make your villain confront the lie that they believe about the world? So just like you would with your hero. What is a gradual, believable step that they can make toward good? So I have a character who turns into a villain over the course of the series, and he has all these kind of checkpoints so he has his best friend say, you know, you're a monster, you've done all these horrible things, and leave him. And then his love interest, he realizes that in order to be with his love interest, he would have to like steal her away, and he finally reaches something, and it's that that is like too far for him, and he's already gone pretty darn far, but he reaches this point where he just has to realize, my gosh, what have I become? In my quest for power, I've lost my best friend. I've driven away my love interest. I'm about to do the most horrific thing that he can imagine. Attack her city or steal her away. And he's like, I've made a misstep somewhere. And his first step toward good is like the most like, well, of course any decent person would do this kind of a step, and that is letting his love interest go home. And he's like, go I can't do this. And then slowly but surely he ends up seeing how she is a much better person than he is, and he looks to her, he looks to his best friend, and kind of subconsciously compares what he's doing to what he's seen them do, because they're both very decent people. And just gradually, step by step, his personality is still the same. He still is very interested in power, he's still very ambitious, but you start to see him really figure some things out and make those gradual, believable steps. Give them a reason to change, not just like, oh, the light one day. So that's if you want to give them a redemption arc. Not every villain needs a redemption arc. I think it's important, maybe it's just a personal thing, I think it's important that we understand that every character, everyone could have a redemption arc, and it's a series of choices and various things that allow or don't allow that to happen. So if we do not give a redemption arc to a character, think about how the defeat that they suffer, if let's assume that they get defeated, we're going classic hero villain here, how is the defeat that they suffer a good match for the lie that the villain believes, reinforcing that, or replacing it with the truth at the very end, or whatever. How is it a good match for that lie that they believe? And how is it a good match for the growth that the hero has undergone to defeat them? Both of those things should just marry in the defeat that the villain experiences. Okay, and then last on my kind of villain checklist, if you will, is the role of a villain in the story structure. Like what does it accomplish to have this villain there? I've already hinted at some of these things, but I'm going to ask 3 more questions and make those concrete. So if you're following along, answer these questions, make up a villain, and I can pretty much guarantee it's going to be a really interesting character. Okay, number 1, what does the hero need to learn or change about themselves to defeat the villain? The villain is the story is about your hero, right? It's about your main character. So what is it that the villain kind of forces them to change about themselves? Is there something that they believed about the world? Is there some weakness that they needed to overcome in order to get strong enough to defeat the villain? How does the villain facilitate change in the hero? Number 2, what characteristics does the villain highlight about the hero? Once again, we're going back to the main character and their journey toward change. The villain's not just there to tie people up and put them on the train tracks. They're there to highlight certain things about the hero. So you take the Batman and Joker, for example. The Joker is a fantastic villain. Batman is also a really compelling character, and they have certain similarities. They work outside of kind of the traditional roles. They show that one person cares deeply about justice and human life. You know, Batman has that thing where he's not going to execute the criminals, and of course he's there for justice. And the Joker is the exact opposite. Just no regard for either of those things. He just wants to watch the world burn. And so seeing the Joker really test Batman's resolve to protect human life and to, you know, identify what justice is part of what makes it so interesting to watch the dynamic between the two. And then, number 3, last, finally, how does the conflict between the hero and the villain reveal a major theme of the story? So when I say major theme, I mean like a kind of like a message of the story. It doesn't need to be a, you know, preachy or didactic message, but really what should the audience get out of this story, and how does the conflict between these two highlight what the audience should get out of the story? So is that the you know, that the world is not as black and white as you would initially think? Is it that you know, justice is worth sacrificing for? Is it, you know, what is that takeaway that you want the audience to find when you pit these two against each other? All right, that is what I have to say about villains. I think villain characters are really fun to write. They can do things that you wouldn't want your protagonists to do usually, and they can really you know, you can do a lot with the inner world of both the villain and the hero through you know, developing a really compelling villain. All right, is there anything that I left out? There's a lot to say about this topic, so I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Otherwise, subscribe to this channel for more writing, publishing, and indie author life videos. Like this video if you like it, and I'll see you next week.